Okay. Oh, whoops. Okay, I just wanted to make sure this was working. I wanted to make a video about targeted individuals and how, people, just so that people in more of like the public gets a good idea about what it means to be a targeted individual, why somebody would call themselves a targeted individual, what happens to targeted individuals. Um, so it might be a quite a long video. And so I'm just going to take my time and try to go over everything that involves targeted individuals. Let me see. I've already forgotten the title of my video, but I just wanted to talk about target individual. Um, Basically, a target individual is somebody who is targeted by high-tech organized criminals. Um, Very high-tech organized crime. The way it works is the person is usually isolated, generally by technology. No, this isn't starting out as a very good video, but hopefully, if you stick with it, you'll see that the information I provide in this video, you will give you a greater sense of targeted individuals. So for me, the first thing that happened was I met a gang stalker. How do I know it was a gang stalker? Well, after I was in a short-term relationship with with that person, um, I don't want to say individual over and over. Um, they started stalking me with a gang. They were involved. They, I had seen them. They did graffiti art. Was one of the pastimes of the person that I met. And so, um, and they had people coming right after I was like, please go away. I'm not into that kind of thing. They had people coming into my workplace calling me a homosexual. Um, but oh, my workplace got graffitied terribly. And the thing is, it was like psych, 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 psych was the main message in the graffiti. Psych. Um, like like it's a trick or it's a setup or it's a joke or it's something like that. And then when I was like, okay, this is obviously this person doing it, I called the cops and the cops came and they're like, so and so got your workplace graffiti and like turned it against me. And that's one thing that happens to target individuals is everything gets turned against that person. It's their fault. It was my fault. It was the victim's fault that the workplace got graffiti because the cop came and he went right to the upper management who's like, so and so's who got your workplace graffitied so terribly. And I was just like, and then also they're like, I kept pressing the issue with the cops, and they're like, we know who did this, and it has nothing to do with the person that you're claiming it does, and that kind of thing. Um, so the number one most important thing for targeted individuals is, well, this might not be the most important thing, but number one in my video is nobody is going to help you. Nobody. The only help that you might receive is mental, not mental disability, but mental health assistance, where everybody says you're crazy. Nobody believes a word about it. Uh, and then you get medicated. But I'll get to that in a little bit. I just want to keep going on about targeted individuals and the way it worked for me. So, The next day after, I'm like, see you later. Because the person I met was my girlfriend at the time. And I guess she'd slept around with like 10 people. And one of her friends from her work told me, hope you don't mind the chewing tobacco. It's kind of gross, the bottle with the spit in it, but that's how it is for me. I like chewing tobacco. Um, so where was I? Oh yeah, one of her work coworkers informed me that she'd been sleeping around with a bunch of people and bragging about it at work. So I was like later, and then all of a sudden I started getting gang stalked. And I was playing on an online poker site, and I mean it was just like, you're a homo, you're a loser, uh, you're this, you're that, and it was every day, constantly. As soon as I would log on, people with names like um one of her ex-boyfriends, one of her many ex-boyfriends. Um, one of her many ex-boyfriends' names on the poker site was like, "Oh yeah, no, good hand," and tried to be my friend and all kinds of stuff. But people were just coming after me. They knew my medical history on the poker site. It was the weirdest thing because they were like, "Oh, you've taken Wellbutrin," and I was like, what is going on? This was the weirdest thing. It scared me. I wish I had a screenshot of the comment because they were talking about how I'd used Wellbutrin. Like, do you know who you're talking to and all this kinds of stuff? And I'm like, I don't really care who I'm talking to. So the poker site thing. Oh, and then I also made a blogging website where I blogged everything that happened, but it got taken down. And I would just write profane trash talking to the stalkers, just profane over and over, day after day after day, night after night after night. That's all I would do because I wasn't having it. I didn't enjoy being gang stalked. And instead of ignoring, I went full force. Like all my mental energy went into combating the gang stalking. I researched everything. I could tell you all about psychotronics. If you've ever heard the term psychotronics, um, psychotronics are weapons that can control your mind, basically. That's a psychotronic weapon. And initially, instead of what I arrived at in the end, which was demonstrated to me with beyond a reasonable doubt, AI mass mind control, I called it psychotronic concentration camp. I believe that I was living within a psychotronic concentration camp where everyone, including myself and the people doing it to me, were having their minds controlled by psychotronics. I ultimately changed into AIMS mind control after it was shown to me that it was an artificial intelligence controlling everyone's minds. Um, but regardless of that, what makes somebody a real targeted individual? Well, here's what kept happening. Um, After I think like 5 years of profane response to everything that happened to me in my life, um, and I could tell something strange was going on. Like all the people around me were like clearly knowing my thoughts, talking about what I was doing when they weren't present. Like the way that would work is I'd sit in an office by myself with the door open, and people would walk by knowing what I was thinking, or walk by knowing about what I was talking about, walk by knowing what I was doing. They'd sit at a table outside my office talking about, these people are going to kill you. These people have all the power, and I'd have to listen to it at work the entire time. So 2010, finally, after 5 years of intense psychological interaction, um, they flew an implant into my head. Finally, it's like, oh, and they called it the terrorist implant because I guess I was the terrorist at the time. And what happened is that initially, I mean, it was painful, first of all, but they're like, perfectamundo, perfectamundo. And they kept saying perfectamundo to me while I was trying to sleep, and then I couldn't sleep. And it was just obvious. So the way that people were acting around me was just strange. And my family, when I tried to tell them, I was like, Mom and Dad, I'm getting stalked. And they're like, oh no. What makes you, and this is the one I've heard so much, what makes you so important that somebody would do that? Or, oh, it's the boogeyman. The boogeyman's out to get you. Oh, the boogeyman's going to get you. Or you're crazy. I mean, just endless, endless stuff. But I don't want to get out of order. I just kind of want to do the whole thing. Like, what makes somebody a real targeted individual? So, what I was doing is I ended up blogging on YouTube about my experiences with being targeted because the implant, I mean, very profane, lots of profanity. Trying to think, there was certain terms that kept being repeated, like, "Are you kidding me?" Perfect is another one. I still get perfect. I like that one. Perfect, perfect. Initially, it was perfectamundo, perfectamundo, and then they started right in with sleep deprivation. Number two, sleep deprivation. Not I only got 2 hours. More like I haven't slept for days. It's like a fake TI will be like, oh, I have sleep deprivation. I got 4 hours of sleep last night. A real TI, I haven't slept for 2 days. I'm trying to sleep. All I'm doing is trying to sleep. And it's been 2, 3, 4, 5 days now. Sleep deprivation is the second thing. And so they were like, Perfectamundo kept me up all night, sleep deprivation, and I was like, um, so I did all the research on psychotronics, psychotronic weapons, psychotronic capabilities, psychotronic technologies, that kind of thing. The cops, oh, and I went to, so I tried to tell my family. Nobody listens. I think that was number one. Nobody is going to help you. That's the number one thing for a targeted individual. It's kind of sad, but at the same time, that's the reality of the world today. Nobody, except for your mental issues that you don't have because it's real people doing it to you. But what was the second one? Sleep deprivation. That was the very first thing. Not, oh, I got 2 hours last night, but just straight up, I haven't slept for days. I'm trying to sleep. That's all that matters to me is closing my eyes and sleeping. Sleep deprivation. Um, but to get back to nobody, the first one, nobody's going to help you. So I was like, okay, this is obvious. I just dumped this woman, and I'm getting stalked by her. Like, for an example, you can look it up on Google. There's this thing called Western Welcome Week. Well, my the business that I work for put on a booth at Western Welcome Week, and like she was there first thing in the morning. I'm like walking back. I had to get some burritos from a Mexican restaurant nearby to sell at Western Welcome Week, and she like walks up to me and then walks past. And then the rest of the time she was like hanging out with the cool people at the beer booth across from my booth, and just like, I mean, it was just stalking. Stalking is that's it was stalking. So I was like, okay, when a crime's being committed against me, I'm supposed to go to the police and report it. The police are not going to help you. They're not gonna. Um, so, let me think. So I went to the police department. I was like, "Oh yeah, here's her job application at my workplace, trying to be my boss. Now that I've dumped her, sir." And I was like, "My work got graffitied. I know it's her." And they're like, "No, we know who did that. It wasn't this woman that you're talking about." And so ultimately, even though I had tangible proof I was being gangs or stalked, I didn't have proof I was being gang stalked because I didn't take screenshots of the online stalking, even though I won millions and millions, not dollars, it was play money, but I won millions of chips. Like I sold them for $11 per million. So, anyways, um, let's see. One, nobody's gonna help you. Two, sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation was huge, especially early on, and it is debilitating. Sleep deprivation is by far one of the strangest feelings. If you've ever been awake for 5 days straight, during my research, because I researched sleep deprivation, I guess the longest somebody's been alive or awake is like 68 days straight or something. I could only imagine. Never got that bad for me. Um, so let's see, sleep deprivation. Oh, so I'm talking to the police. I'm like, here's her applying to my workplace. Here's her calling me on my cell phone when I've asked her to not contact me. Um, here is, I think that was mostly the stuff I had. And you know what they said to me? Have you considered talking to somebody? I'm just like, what are you talking about? I was at home with this employment application and my cell phone record here showing right here's her phone number on my cell phone, sir. And you know what they said to me? Have you considered talking to somebody about your mental issues? And at that point, I'm just like, the world's gone crazy. You know, it's like, here's the proof, sir or ma'am. And they're like, no. So I was like, okay. So that's another one. Um, people say, or um, people say you have mental issues. It's you. Oh, you. That's the third one. Everything is about you, not not these gang stalkers, not your family, not your coworkers, not your friends, not your enemy. You. You have a problem. It's your fault. You're the reason that it happened. Um, you. So after the cops were like, I was like, yeah, see you later. See you later. I got out of there so quick because I was like, I know I'm not crazy. I know that there's organized crime does exist, sir. And so, um, after that, oh, loss of job. So I was making a website on YouTube. I was documenting my experience. And you know what happens? Like after 5 years of documentation, the big wigs from the corporate office show up, and I should have sued for this one, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. I'm fine financially. I don't really need to show my my living situation or anything like that, but I'm okay financially. Regardless of that, the big wigs at my job that I'd worked at since I was 16 and I was now 25, so it'd been 9 years. Or I was now 30, so it had been 14 years of steady, no write up employment, except for after I was targeted. After I was targeted, I was working, and I left one kid's name off of a roster at my job. And the guy went to the BBB about it, and they got a negative mark, so I got written up for that. It was the first time in 14 years And, I always, for one kid getting left off of a list, supposedly that was enough to go to the Better Business Bureau and make a statement about my work. So I did get written up for that one, finally. But it's all because I was targeted. It didn't matter. But like I was saying, loss of employment number 4. I think I'm on 4, maybe 3. What was it? Nobody will ever help you. Sleep deprivation. It's all about you. And loss of employment. I lost my job because I made a website on YouTube. Um, even though they're like, well, as long as you don't, you're allowed to advocate anything you like. This was in the employee handbook. You are allowed to advocate anything you want about anything that you like, as long as you don't wear our company logo while doing it. It's your right to do that on your own. So that's what I did. I made a YouTube page about all the things that were happening, being gang stalked. And you know what happens? The big wigs show up. They're like, oh, we received an anonymous email about a website. We have to put you on temporary leave and you have to go see a risk assessment. I should have not gone to it. I should have just been like, well, I'm putting in my 2 weeks and I'm out of here. But I went to the risk assessment, and you know what the guy says to me? He's like, have you ever gotten in trouble with the law? And I was like, yeah, I got a DUI once when I was 19. And he was like, oh, okay. So then I was like, oh, and then he's like, so you claim that there are technologies that can control people to look the other way while is getting raped? I was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Um, he's like, on your website that you've made, you claim that. And I was like, I don't know what website, because I deleted it right after the bigwigs showed up in my office, and they were like, based upon the information you're providing on a website, we have to put you on temporary leave and send you to a risk assessment. So I was like, okay. So I went to the assessment. I told them I've been in trouble once or twice. Don't know what you're talking about as far as the information regarding advanced technologies. And so then they call me up while I'm at home the next day. They call me up and they're like, you're a threat. You're a threat. You're not welcome here ever again. If you ever come back, you're going to prison. And just all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, people were so intensely aggressive towards me. It was really hard to deal with. And they're like, you are fired. We are terminating you. And so I lost my job based because I made a website advocating against the potential abuses of advanced technologies. Loss of employment. That's number 4. So then after that, they amped up the sleep deprivation, and it was a 5-day period of sleep deprivation. Number 6, mental institutionalization. These are all the things that make people real targeted individuals. None of this, Mo, I got some crud in the eye, and I work really hard, and I have 2 children, or any of that kind of thing. None of that stuff. Just forget all that stuff. Um, so after a 5-day period of sleep deprivation, I then they do they do the 5 hours of intense brain temperature, like 200-degree temperatures in my brain on day 4 while I'm still awake. And then on day 5 they did it a second time, and I end up walking home barefoot in like 90-degree weather. It was burning my feet. And I remember, though, when I was walking home, 2 men began walking towards me on the sidewalk, younger than me, probably like 19 or 20. They start walking towards me as I'm walking up the sidewalk to my family's house from my apartment, because I lived 5 miles away or so. And the implant that I had in my head, because I was like, these people look shady to me. I'm gonna cross the street. I'm walking barefoot. It hurts. So I cross the street and start walking down the other side of the street. And the implant says, "We thought you wanted to shake the hand of the person doing this to you." I was like, "Oh yeah, I did," because I'm very thankful. So I turn around and walk over to him, and it was supposed to be the guy in the hat, but instead he had a friend with him. Because that's the thing about gang stalkers. Usually, they have at least 2 people, and if not more. So, I go up and I try to shake his hand, and the other guy reaches out and shakes my hand. This is the crazy stuff that happens to real targeted individuals. So anyways, I end up continuing to go home, so I end up going home, and at that point, I believe that it was, because I believed crazy stuff a long time ago. I will admit that. But I thought it was people, and it still may be, I don't really know for sure, but I thought it was people in DIA, Denver International Airport, live there on like 10 stories down in an underground home. Because, and the reason why I think it's possible is that, being located at a place of transportation, one. Secondly, underground living or living centers makes sense in the event of like a nuclear disaster or something like that. Everybody who's in on it, who knows what's going on, can go there to be safe while everybody else dies. You know, so I thought it was DI. I thought it was there. So I end up walking home. My dad immediately takes me back to my apartment, and I drive out to DIA in my car. I drive there. Um, I go down some back road, and then I turn down some road towards the airport. It was like a dirt road, and there was a Cherokee. I still remember this. A Jeep Cherokee was sitting there and blocking the road. And so I was like, well, that's the end of that. So I turned around and went home. But while I'm at home, this is mental institution. While I'm at home, oh, and I forgot to mention that people around me, around my apartment, had been talking like very loudly, like, Commander, so and so thinks this, or Commander, so and so thinks that. Just all kinds of weird military oriented stuff towards me. So I was sitting at home. So my dad takes me back to my apartment. I drive out to DIA. I drive home. This is after 5 days of sleep deprivation, 2 days of 200-degree temperatures in the brain. On the second day, and I finally, oh wait, no. And then the guy that was walking down the street with the hat on, the guy in the hat with the Metallica shirt, he had a Metallica shirt and an Indiana Jones hat, walks in. I finally lay down on my couch, and they're like, they're talking to me through the implant, like, up down, we always win, so and so, blah blah blah, we always win, and they're just saying all kinds of nonsense to me. And then he walks in to my apartment. Either I didn't lock the door or they have ways of unlocking the door. I don't really know. I had one of those bars that you can put on your door to make sure nobody comes in, but I hadn't done that because I was 5 days sleep deprivation, 200-degree temperature in the brain. I was done. I walked home in 90-degree weather, barefoot. I was finished. I drove to DIA. Oh, I forgot. When I was driving to DIA, a technology seemed to have been released from the trunk of my vehicle and then flew up the side of my vehicle and started going up my left leg and burning, like, I mean, it was painful. I remember I was like sitting up in my chair, like out while driving my car down the road. And so I ended up making it back home, and I finally lay down on the couch, and they're like, "Oh, this was about money." And then I start receiving phone calls. So I'm like, Wells Fargo is calling me. Why is Wells Fargo calling me? And I thought he was on the television. And I'd been driving, well, prior to that, I'd been driving up to the mountains and just doing like trying to find secret places, and just all kinds of really nonsensical stuff. But to get back to what happened is I finally lay down. The guy walks into my apartment. I look up and I see the guy. Then I lay back down in my own apartment, like I didn't care that somebody had just entered. So I never saw him again. Supposedly, he was the Prince of Denver. That's all they said to me. It was like, that was the Prince of Denver. So I'm like, okay, I was the Prince of Denver. I ended up calling him Drummy Drum because there's a video on YouTube where they're like, Drummy, Drummy, Drum, Drum. And he kind of reminded me, like the clothes he wore kind of reminded me of that video. So that was his nickname from me. But to get to the mental institutionalization, so I'm finally done. So I'm laying there. They're like, we are inducing fear. We are inducing fear. This guy thinks he's so cool. We are inducing fear. Um, we are inducing emotional instability. And it just kept going on and on and on and on. Then finally, I hear the guy who moved into the apartment above me. Oh, and while I was living there, I want to make sure I include everything. Bed bugs infested my apartment, and I had no, I had nowhere else to go, so I just lived in it, and it was nasty. Um, but these are the types of things that happen to real targeted individuals. Um, so then they start yelling, "This is the FBI!" From the apartment above me because I had the door open, and the guy could yell down at me, "This is the FBI! If you don't get up right now, we're gonna come down there and shoot you." And I took that fairly seriously. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get killed." So I grabbed my cell phone, got up again after 5 days, and walked out the door. In my cell phone, I had the direct number for the police department, and I called the police and I was like, yeah, I'm being harassed. The man in the apartment above mine is threatening my life." And I'm walking down the street and they're like, "Sir, where are you located?" I was like, "I'm walking down such and such a street." They're like, "Sir, please wait there." And I'm like, "What does this have to do with me being harassed by the person who lived in the apartment?" But remember, it doesn't have anything to do with anybody other than you when you're a targeted individual. And the guy, so the cop shows up and he's like, I don't remember what he was saying, but I'm like, "I don't like this. I don't like your attitude, sir. I'm gonna call the sheriff." And he snatches the phone out of my hand, throws it down. And I'm like, "What's going on here?" So I get up and start running as fast as I can, running, 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 because I hadn't done anything to anybody. I hadn't broken any laws or anything else. So I'm just running. I run down. This was after 5 days of sleep deprivation, 5 years of psychological torture and harassment and energy. And I run into a ditch and into a marsh and fall down. It's kind of funny now. So, anyways, ambulance shows up and he puts me in handcuffs. And then they put me in the back of the ambulance in handcuffs, and there's like 5 people in there. One of the guys like, "Oh, I'm military intelligence." And he had like a laptop, and he was writing things down. "I'm military intelligence." This was the stuff I went through. And so I'm in the back of an ambulance, and they drive around, and the cops following us. But while in the ambulance, these people are just saying all kinds. And I look at them, and they look like they had bugs crawling up in and out of their noses and stuff. I mean, it was just freaked out stuff. And um, he puts me in the ambulance, even though I called the cops because the guy in the apartment above me was threatening my life. So I called him for harassing. And they throw me in the ambulance, put me in handcuffs, throw me in the ambulance, and then they drive all over the place. All over the place. They drove to one hospital, turned around, did a U-turn, did like 25 U-turns. All I remember is that it was crazy. I can laugh about it now because I'm in a better place. But It was not mental issues. So, anyways, they end up taking me to the hospital. I get put in a room, and then the next thing, a blonde-haired nurse, because for some reason I was thinking it was like Israel and all kinds of stuff. I didn't have any clue, but I don't think that anymore. I don't think I like Israel. Um, but so, and she's like, she does something to my hand, and it goes like, I'm like, what was that? So, oh, it's just a real ID chip. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she leaves. Next thing you know, some guy comes in. I mean, and he was plain clothes man, but he's like, and shoves something down my throat. And I'm like, what? He's like, this is for your nanotechnologies. Except for it was very aggressive and very mean. Every single person just had a mean look on their face. And so I'm sitting there in the hospital. They're shoving medication down my throat, doing weird stuff to my hand. Supposedly, the technologies inside my body were like, oh, into your heart, out of your heart, into your heart, out of your heart, into your heart, out of your heart. And like I was going to die. So then nothing happens. I finally like go to sleep after 5 days of that. And then they move me into another room. The initial gang stalker comes in and walks out. This is just how weird it was. The initial woman that I had dumped was there that day, but it doesn't end there. They move me into another room. There's a phone. I'm like, I need a lawyer. So I try to get the phone. They come in and rip the phone off the wall. And so then I go, finally, they take me to the mental institute. And so I'm sitting there, and there's all these people, and they're all talking. They're like, blah, blah, blah. So and so this, so and so that, so and so stands up, so and so sat down, so and so walked around, so and so. And they put me, and I also remember that I was in a room with a man, and he raised up his blanket, and he had a gun. Oh, so then then the initial gang stalker woman comes in again because she had been working towards becoming a traveling nurse. That's one thing that she had told me about when I knew her. She had been working towards becoming a traveling nurse. She comes in a nurse uniform and is like, uh, and I just sit up and I was like, I don't take medication. And then I went back to sleep. Oh, and then I thought that the implant flew out my nose into the toilet, but that was all hallucination. With the fly. They're like, oh, it's the king's favorite fly, is what they called the implant because I saw it entering as it entered into the left side of my head. Like I can see my hand right now, even though I'm looking straight. And the closer it gets, I can still see my hand. I can't identify it, but I can see it. So, um, and so then the guy finally I have a sit down with the psychiatrist or um psychiatrists. Well, I guess psychiatrist. I have a sit down. He's like, "Yeah, so what's been going on?" I was like, "Oh, friends are good. Life is good. Work was good. I recently got laid off, and so I don't mention anything about being gangster. I didn't mention it to the cops. I didn't mention it to the psychiatrist. I didn't mention it to anybody. I didn't mention nanotechnologies to anybody. I didn't mention any of the stuff that was happening to me because I knew what was going to happen. It didn't matter. It happened anyway. So the guy goes back and comes back and he's like, oh, and he was crying because they induced the emotional instability on people with the AI mass mind control. And he was crying and he's like, Um, you have been diagnosed with delusional disorder. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? I totally, it's like sign here, and I marked I completely disagree, and then I signed it. And then finally, after like 48 hours, 72-hour hold, however long, supposedly I was a threat to myself or others throughout that entire thing, where I'm the most harmless person you could ever meet. Like, I'm a pacifist. I believe in like peace on earth. If you're not living it already, you're missing out. Um, anyways, perfectly, perfectly, perfectly. They pipe up when I talk about the good stuff. Um, so let me think here. Where was I? Oh yeah, delusional disorder. So then my my dad, was everyone is being controlled by AMS mind control. That's why I'm happy to tell my story on YouTube. My dad shows up and he's like, um, tell him about psychotronic concentration camp. Because I didn't say a word to anybody. So the fact that the AI knew that it had kept me quiet the entire time about all the stuff that had been happening to me. And then the cop wrote down, they gave me a report, and it's like dialed 911, false. Claimed people's minds were being controlled, false. I didn't do any of that. And even though I should have sued again because I got fired. I should have sued. And then I should have sued the cop because just because he said I claimed everyone's minds were being controlled, even though I didn't make any statements regarding mind control to the police because I'm not stupid. That doesn't make me a threat to self or others. And he placed me onto a 5150 hold based upon that statement. Now, that's illegal, but as you can see, for targeted individuals, everyone around the targeted individual does illegal stuff and gets away with it. So, anyways, and then finally I get out of that, go back home. That was the first mental institutionalization for me. I didn't get placed like no court orders or anything like that, but another one. This is number five, I want to say. One was nobody will ever help you. Two was sleep deprivation. Three was it's all about you, I think. Four, I don't remember, but five is criminal charges. It don't matter if you're the most legal for target individuals. Doesn't matter if you're the most law-abiding person who ever lived. If you're not getting pressed with criminal charges about something, whether it be harassment or I'm trying to think, DUI, driving, just some kind of criminal charge. If you aren't getting pressed with criminal charges, then you are not a targeted individual. I'm sorry, but real targeted individuals go through massive pain and suffering, massive sleep deprivation, massive criminal charges, massive mental institutionalization, loss of employment, loss of friends, loss of family, loss of everything. Not any of this. Oh, I got some crud in the eyes. They all deserve capital punishment because for me, they're not guilty. Anyways, so where was I? Um, I was going on. So then I get out finally. I get out after 3 days of being there, and they're like, one thing I remember though, because everyone was like, he stood up, he sat down, he stood up, he sat down, he walked around, he did this, he did that, everything I was doing. Somebody was verbally, and then the initial gang stalker, before I forget, while I was in the mental institute for the first time, was at the window, like complaining about something. Like, and then I was like, I tried to like go over, but then they're like, no, no, stay away. So she showed up three times within 24 hours. In my life because I had been so adamant about getting rid of that person out of my life. So then I get out, I go home, and everything gets back to normal except for, wait, no, I go back to my apartment. It gets good. And then So, like sleep deprivation, pain and suffering, all that continues to go on. And then the next major event, this is mental institutionalization number two. I'm not afraid to talk about it. At this point, I'm like, holy hell, who's going to be able to put up with this much stuff? My family hates me suddenly, even though I'm back to the normal loving family. I love my family. They love me. Everything is good. But at that point, my family hated me. Now, all my friends were like, oh, all right, I had friends. I did have friends. And they were like, I'm trying to tell them, I'm like, oh, I'm being stalked. I'm being stalked by organized criminals. Like, we're good. That's all they have. We don't want to hear about it. We're good. I thought you were my friend. No, we're good. We don't care. So I was like, okay. So at that point, family turned against me, friends turned against me, criminal charges, mental institutionalization, 5 days of sleep deprivation, everything else. So I remember this day. I went to the gas station and I got a Mountain Dew. And when I opened it, something flew out of my hair into it and made it fizz up, like overflow. And I was like, oh, well, gulp, 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 gulp. I didn't care what went into my Mountain Dew. I drank it anyways. I love Mountain Dew. So, oh, and the attendant, the person that I bought the Mountain Dew from, she was like, people are quitting their jobs because of you, which was a strange gang-stalker statement towards me. So I'm like, whatever. So I go home, back to my apartment, and they're like, with through the implant, they're like, there's an issue. I'm like, oh, there is? What's the issue? Like, oh, we've installed the wrong implant, and it's going to cause you to die in the most painful manner possible, unless you can somehow lie quietly on the floor without hearing any noise in your head at all. So, but before that, I was doing all kinds of like weird pageantry where I was like shooting arrows and sword play and jumping around my apartment, and having a good time. I really remember that. 99% of it was actually as horrific as it was psychologically enjoyable for me. I don't know why. Anyways, so I'm doing all this pageantry, and then they're like, "Oh, there's an issue with the implant. You got to stop, or else it's going to kill you in the most painful way possible." And I was like, "Okay." So I laid down on the floor, like, "Your dad is climbing." Brought his 44 revolver over, and he's climbing up on the um, washing machine in the room below your apartment, because right below my apartment was the laundry room. And it sounded like, in my head, it sounded like somebody was putting a gun up to the floor beneath me. And like, they're like, oh, he can't do it though because you're his son, and all this stuff. And so after they were like, uh, if you can't be completely quiet and to reset the device, I mean, it was just a bunch of load of nonsense. Then you're gonna have to figure out a way to kill yourself. And so, basically, I barricaded myself into a room by myself, and I took a knife. Let me see here. Yeah, you can see it right here. And I actually have them all the way. There's one there. Um, let me see. Let me see if I can get the best one. You can't really see it, but anyways, sliced both my arms up really badly. Stabbed myself in the chest. Tried to kill myself, and they wouldn't let me die. Well, the way it went was, so I'm like, okay, I'm bleeding out. I'm lying on the floor. Like, okay, let's get up. So I get up, go into my bedroom, lie on the bed, big bloody mess. Um, they're like, our computer Oh, you have a computer and all this stuff. They're like, the computers are battling, computer battling computer. 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100. And all that, just, this is the type of stuff that real targeted individuals experience. So after laying in my bed for like a half hour, they're like, okay, let's get up. And I'm bleeding. I mean, my arms look like fish gills. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see that one there. Um, there's one down here. Both arms completely sliced up, bleeding out. Stabbing my chest was nothing. I didn't get my heart or anything. So I end up jumping out the bedroom window. I take the screen out, jump 2 stories, down, land on my feet, walk to my car, which I had crashed into a fence earlier that day. It was still just sitting there. The cops didn't show up or nothing. Um, get in the back seat of my car, and I'm sitting there. Oh, and I was supposed to go on a trip with my dad. We were supposed to go out of town for some reason. I don't remember what it was now. Um, but so I'm sitting in the back seat of my car. Both my arms are bleeding. Um, and they're like, "Oh, we're using X-ray goggles on you from the apartment around you." So I'm looking at all the different apartments. I'm like, "I don't see anybody." Oh, and then somebody waved at me. And I was like, "I see them." And then after that, I got out of my car and my dad walks up. And you know what he's doing? He's holding his camera, his iPhone, holding his phone, taking a video of me laying there in 100-degree weather on the pavement, both arms sliced up and stabbed in the chest. I'm like, Dad, call 911. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is good. Because the thing is, the Gang-Stalkers have access to all cellular phones and technologies and everything. So they can take a video. Like if he's taking a video, they can see it through the phone. And so finally he calls 911 and that took like 10 more minutes. Um and they show up. They check me for weapons, everything. I'm good. Throw me in the back of the um ambulance, drive me off to the ambulance or to the hospital. And the only thing I remember is I wake up while they're like doing stuff to me and I sit up and they all shove me back down. That's the only thing I really remember. Oh, other than I also remember one of the nurses waking up and one of the nurses was sewing up my arm. So, then I finally wake up in a hospital bed. I think I'm in Israel for some reason. I thought I'd been transported, but it has nothing to do with Israel. I like Israel. Um, and let me think here. Oh, they have like a watcher person because it's supposedly suicide, but it wasn't a suicide attempt. I was trying to kill myself so to avoid dying in the most painful way possible. That was more than just simply committing a suicide. Like I hadn't given up on life or anything like that. I was just like, oh, really? So I'm laying there. Um, the day, the same day, because on the news, I'm laying there. I wake up the next day. The Aurora theater shooting had happened. I'm like, is this a coincidence? I don't even know. Like, did I stab myself and slice myself up all over the place after 5 days of sleep deprivation? 10 hours of super pain, people walking into my apartment, the cops taking me, going to the mental institute, every other freaking thing. So I'm in the mental institute for this. Well, I'm in the hospital and they're watching me. And you know what, though? I remember this now. It just popped in my head. The first thing is I wake up, there's a guy standing there. And you know what he wants to know? Did you really jump out of your apartment? Like, yeah, I jumped out of my apartment. That's the first thing somebody says to me. And then finally, my family shows up. Oh, and the thing is, even though I didn't penetrate like through my rib cage or whatever it is that protects your heart, I'll show you. You can't really see it at that angle, but anyways, they opened up my chest as well. So that's what happened to me. Opened up my chest, both arms completely sliced up. Um, so then I'm there, and I remember sleep talking while I was in the hospital. I remember sleep talking. Um, so then after that, I end up in the mental institute for the second time. That was the second mental institutionalization, supposedly for suicide. And at that point, my parents, who hated me, said if I didn't get a regular psychiatrist, that um, they wouldn't allow me to, um, be a part of their lives. They wouldn't have me in their life anymore. And so I was like, well, I mean, even though you hate me because I'm crazy and um, everything is about you, it has nothing to do with anybody around you, and you call the cops on me 10 times for doing nothing. Don't get me wrong, but it gets better. It gets better. Mental Institute, second time. They placed me on a chemical called Haldol. I don't know if you've ever experienced Haldol. Oh, it's to help with your mental issues. Trust me, because once you feel like you are mentally impaired to the point of retardation, that supposedly is helping. Don't ask me how that helps, but that supposedly is helping. So I get placed on Haldol. I take Haldol for a while. Um, But it didn't, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, no, here's some Zyprexa." Uh, Wait, no, the Zyprexa came later. It was Haldol. Oh, and then I see a doctor because it was like $200,000. I didn't have health insurance, so they're like, "Oh, and here's a bill for $200,000 as well." It's like this is how it goes for real targeted individuals. If you ever want to hear a real targeted individual story, I'm giving you one right now. They're like, okay, so 200,000 bucks. And but fortunately they had a program called Doctor's Care. And I qualified for Doctor's Care, which paid for 90% of it. So I owed 20 grand. I'd lost my job. I had no money. I was doing officiating, youth and adult sports officiating. So I was able to pay some of it. And even though my parents acted extremely cruel towards me through this period of my life, they paid the 20K. So I was like, okay, that's fine then. Um, so then I move in. After that, I am forced because I could no longer afford an apartment. I had turned it into a messy, bloody, gory scene at my apartment. I was forced to move back in with my family, but it doesn't get better. Um, so, uh, this is kind of a hazy thing, but oh, my dad starts calling the cops on me every day. And I don't mean like I did something to get the cops called on me. Like, this is what happens to targeted individuals. Your family calls the cops on you for no reason. Now, here's an example. Here's my favorite example. I'm sleeping in my bed, and the cops show up in my room while I'm sleeping. They're like, and the guy's standing there, like, with his arms crossed and his hand, one of them has hands on the hip, and it's like they're doing all kinds of stuff. The cops show up. I'm like, why are the cops here? Why are you here? Like, you know why we're here. It's always you. I had no idea why the cops were there. I had been sleeping. There had been no instances why the cops should be called, but they were there. But then they left. I'm like, okay. So the cops leave. So then my dad calls the cops on me again the next day. And the cop comes in, and I had watched a bunch of cop videos because being a target individual, I had had many interactions with the police. And I was like, well, I want to know my rights so I can interact with the police and try to do what's best for me. So after I think it was the third time he called the cops, like a rookie cop shows up. And he's like, I'm like, am I being detained? He's like, no. And so then I was like, am I free to go? He's like, yeah. So I start to walk away. I start to walk away, and the cop's like, where are you going? I'm like, what? He's like, get over here. I'm like, okay. I'm not going to disobey a police officer who's got a gun, especially in my situation where everybody's just this freaking psychopath. And so he puts me in handcuffs, places me in the back of his vehicle. Not for committing any crimes. I wasn't pressed with any charges. I had not been a threat to myself or anyone, and I should have sued. But hindsight is 2020. I could probably still sue for this stuff, but I don't really care. I love life too much now to sue anybody for any reason at all. But I get taken to the mental institute for the third time. I think this was the third time. And I'm sitting there at the mental institute and I'm talking to this girl. And she's like, oh yeah, my family has a book from the Templars and all kinds of stuff. And one of my favorite parts about the regular mental institute was like so many people there weighed at least 400 pounds. Um, but regardless of that, so I was at the mental institute, and one thing that happened while I was in the mental institute is I was looking out the window. I'm laying there, I'm sitting there looking out the window, and there's a silver aircraft, like a UFO looking like have if you ever seen Navigator, it looked like that, flying around all over the place outside the window. And the implant like, it's us. We're having such a great time. Well, you're stuck in the mental institute with a totally screwed over life because the gang stalkers, the way they view life is a comparison between people. And in order to be up high, someone has to be down low. And I am or was that someone. I don't really view things as a comparison of people, like how much money you have or how big your genitals are or any of that kind of thing as an example. Um, so Um, that was the third mental institutionalization, and they made me take probably Risperdal again. I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't think it was Zyprexa. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where I'm at. So I finally get out of there. I hadn't committed any crimes. There was no reason for me to be there, and so then I go back home. But they're like, you have to take this medication now, and it was Zyprexa. And if you know anything about Zyprexa, stuff is nasty. Never take it. Oh, the thing about people with mental issues, well, I don't have mental issues because it's all target individual stuff. But the thing about one of the things about the medication that they give you is that if you read the fine print, it says can cause sudden death. Oh, thanks so much for the help. Can cause sudden death. That was my favorite one. I'm like, oh, medication that'll just plain kill me. Thanks. Thanks for helping me with my mental issues. And so after that, like they stopped calling the cops. But then finally what happened is my family was going out of town and I didn't get to go. I don't really remember why. I was staying back behind to take care of the place or whatever. And as they were leaving, I remember approaching the vehicle and I was just like, look at the spunny look on your face. And as I was, they drove off and left, and then came back, drove off and left again, came back a second time, and then the cops showed up, and then all of a sudden, everybody started crying right when the cops showed up for no reason. Like I didn't actually do anything to anybody. I committed zero crimes. Cop shows up. I'm like, oh, great. I've been through this. This is like the 10th time the cops have been here for no freaking reason. I just put my hands behind my back and I was like, okay, let's go. I'll get out of this place to go to the next screwed over psycho place. So, um, cops like, everyone starts crying. And the cop goes like, you stay here. Cop goes inside to talk to my family. He's like, yeah, that's going to be menacing and harassment and all kinds of stuff. So I was like, okay, fine, let's go there. So then I go to the jail. I get taken to jail. So I'm like, all right, I get taken to jail. So I'm in jail and I go to court and they have to carry me out because I don't remember why. I was like, I must be forced and caused to act. That's what I would say. The only thing I would say is I must be forced and caused to act. And while I'm sitting, that's one thing that happened. I don't know if you've ever been tased, but real target individuals have been tased because I'm sitting in there. I'm sitting in the jail cell, and they come in. They're like, "You need to get in this chair because it's like the strap down chair." Um, oh, it's because I had been pushing against the door, and so they're like, "You need to get in the strap down chair." Because I had been in there for at least 2 weeks and I had no clue what was going on. So I was getting a little impatient and a little uncertain about my situation. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I must be forced and caused to act. And so both dudes like start like manhandling me, trying to get me into the chair. And I'm just sitting there. And the guy steps back and he's like, shoots me with the taser. And I'm like, but it didn't hurt. If you've ever been, I don't know how it works for most people because I've seen people cry like babies, but I'm just like pluck, pluck. And after I plucked out the two taser prongs, I'm like, so did you want me to get in that chair? So then I got in the chair. So then they strap me down in the chair, and I'm sitting there in the chair, and the nurse comes in. I'm like, oh my God, the nurse was totally crazy. She's like, you need to sit down and shut up. Like every day, that's all I ever heard from her. So I'm like, okay, people that act like that aren't my type of healthcare givers. So I start jumping up and down in the chair, like, leave me alone, leave me alone. And so finally, she left. And then after a little while, they come in and let me out of the chair. And I'm like, oh, okay. So after like a month of being in jail, having committed no crimes. I was charged with harassment, menacing. Oh, I totally forgot this part. So while I was on a total like not schizo, but total psychological like nightmare daydream thing, I drove my car. I was like, I'm gonna drive my car to. I don't really know where I was driving to. Fort Collins, I guess. So I drove to like west of Fort Collins, and I ended up in the middle of the country. And I drove my car into a river I thought was a road, but it was actually a dried up river, and it was like dirt, and I got stuck there over 100 miles away from my house and probably 20 miles from the interstate. So I start walking back, and some people show up in a truck and was like, "Hey, can I get a ride back to the interstate?" They're like, "No," and they drove off. And so finally, though, the cops show up and they're like, "Can we give you a ride?" I'm like, "No, I don't want anything from the cops." Um, so they call my dad, and he comes to pick me up. But I mean, he's the one that's called the cops on me like 25 times at this point for zero reason. Sleeping was one reason, watching television was another. This is how it goes for targeted individuals. And so um, we're driving home, and he's like, I'm going to call the cops on you right now for this. I'm like, what did I do? So he starts to get out. He gets out his card, which has the cop's phone number, and I snatch it out of his hand and throw it out the window because I was so tired of it. And so he called the cops on me for that too. And they showed up and said that I had broken the protection order because I lived with the victims of my supposed harassment and menacing, which I had done none of. You'll have to take my word for it, but this is just how it goes for targeted individuals. Police contacts, endless police contacts. Let me just kind of summarize so far. Endless police contacts, mental institutionalizations, loss of employment, sleep deprivation. It's all your fault. Gang stalking, technological torture, physical bodily harm and torture, psychological bodily harm, or psychological torture. That's how it goes for TIs. Not crud in the eye. You deserve capital punishment. I get so tired of it when I hear that. Anyways, where was I? So I drive home and I go back. Well, yeah, no, that's right. The judge let me out initially. I forgot that part. I need to go back in my story. So after I get taken to jail, I'm there for like a day. The judge lets me out based upon my own recognizance. Um, but then I get sent back because I broke the protection order because the victims, I was supposed to have no contact with the victims or something like that. I don't know, but I lived there, so they just like my dad picked me up from the jail and we went home. But then so I go back. This time I'm stuck there for at least a month before I find out anything that's going on. Finally, somebody shows up and he's like, "Do you know what you're being charged with?" And I'm like, "I don't answer questions without a lawyer." And he's like, "Um, do you know where you are?" I don't answer questions without a lawyer. I mean, I knew like I've been charged with harassment, which is intimidate, shove, kick, um, menacing, which is causing an action which causes somebody to fear for their life, and breaking protection order. I knew all this stuff. I knew all this stuff. I knew I was in Gunnison, or not Gunnison, but Kiowa, Colorado, Elbert County Jail, all that kind of thing. I knew exactly where I was. And so, anyways, I'm like, look, I don't answer questions without my lawyer present. So if you want to get him down here, we can go over this. He's like, this is not a lawyer situation. Like, what are you talking about? Every situation is a lawyer situation. And so the guy's like, you are incompetent. So I got deemed incompetent at that point. And so then I get transferred to another county jail for health, into the health unit where everybody's isolated. I was permanently isolated. It had been at least 6 months. I want to say, yeah, it had been at least 6 months. And they're like, oh, we're waiting on a bed at CCHMP, Colorado Corrections Mental Health something. I don't remember what it was called, but it was the criminally insane hospital. Oh man. Like I'm completely innocent. I never done nothing to nobody. This is the way my life was going. I'm not gonna cry though. Because I was actually having a good time. So they're like, we're waiting for a bed there. And so well, no, it wasn't another 6 months, but it was at least 6 months before I finally got into the hospital. Could have sued for that, as it turned out. Speedy trial. Also, not being able to have a bed or being locked up for an extended period of time, having committed no offense or being found guilty, even though allegations had been pressed, or there had been allegations against me. Could have sued, didn't. So that was the third time. I could have sued for losing my job. Could have sued twice for 5150 holds, and I could have sued for the long-term lockup that I was placed into, but I didn't care. So the food was okay. I was at Douglas County for probably 3 more months. Finally, I get a bed in this place. And they place me. This is the guy sits down with me my first day. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you know what? I think you're going to commit an assault. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never harmed a person in my lifetime. He's like, no, I've got you pegged. You're going to assault somebody. So they place me in the highest security felony. And I'm like, I start talking to the guy across the way. He's like, oh, yeah, I killed 3 people. I'm like, what in the world? And he was serious. Like I was placed within all these criminally insane, high security um, murderers and stuff. And I had done nothing. It was kind of scary, but we played some poker. It was all right. I was all right. So finally, I had had enough, and so I started jumping up and down in my room and be like making a bunch of noise. They they come rushing in with like body bags and stuff to like make sure they're safe and like push me around with body bags. And so they're like, lay down. So I'm like, okay, I lay down. And they shot me full of something while I was in the criminally insane mental institute. That was I think that was the last time. So I'm there, and I quickly, because I just kept being myself, so I quickly got out of the highest security because I didn't assault anybody or get in any fights. Or I've never been violent in my life. Um, so they move me up, and I escalate to like the highest tier, lowest security over the first month or so. And you get like points where you can turn in your points for like a candy bar or a diary and stuff like that. So I get to the highest level place. They hadn't done anything. Oh, they did force me to take Zyprexa, and Zyprexa, it's supposedly to help with mental issues. But the thing is, oh wait, no, no, they didn't make me take anything. That's right. I wasn't well, sorry. I wasn't forced to take any medication until I had to see a judge. And I had developed a defense. I was like, well, from my experiences, this psychiatrist who is forcing me to see a judge about forced medication has a history of automatically assuming people require that. And um, I had a pretty strong defense, and I even talked to an attorney, and she was like, oh yeah, no, this is great, we should be able to prevent you from having to take it. So then I went in and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take the meds. And like, so I started a regimen of Zyprexa. Don't ever take Zyprexa. I put on hmm, 60 pounds within the first 3 months. Um, and so I was there for a period of time longer. Finally got out. Um, then, oh yeah, that's what. So I'm seeing my psychiatrist, and I see a psychiatrist regularly, and um, oh yeah, thanks, I appreciate that. Seeing the psychiatrist, and she's like, "Oh, your parents are saying that you're not taking your medication, so we're gonna require you to get an injection." So, in order for my family to remain a part of my life, even though I've never done anything to anybody, I am a completely law-abiding person. I lost my job. I got sent to the mental institute 5 times. I went to prison or jail for over a year before I even ever went to court. This is how it goes for targeted individuals. Let me repeat. It's not, oh, I got some crud in my eye, capital punishment. Because being probably the most victimized TI that ever lived, at least in my own opinion, I wouldn't want anything to happen to the gang stalkers. I want them to be themselves. I want them to live those horrible lives. I want them to experience those psychologies that they have, because I know that a good wholesome family life blows all that out of the water. Anyways, So where was I? So my psychiatrist was like, "Oh yeah, you got to get an injection." So for the past quite a long time now, I can't remember how long it's been. I get Aristata, which causes TD, tardive dyskinesia, but it's so that my family doesn't disown me because I've always loved my family. And over, not since the medication, I can't say since the medication, but oh, that was one part I left out in my story, was that every day they, through the implant, they would talk to me in my head and then be like, "Hey, how are you?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm good." But like my mom or dad would walk by right when I would say that, like, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, my friend through the, and they're like, "You're always talking to yourself, you have mental issues." This, I call it forced speech, because with so many, like, it's like when you're driving down the road and you see somebody talking, you got to figure they're on a cell phone call with somebody, right? So that was part of it. Like the forced speech was a constant thing. This was prior to that final mental institution. So started getting an injection, and although right when I started the injection, um, that's when my dad was like, "Oh yeah, this place called Bookmakers down the street from our house." So I'd go there and I order food, and there's an attractive hostess, and she brings out my food and she's like, "Here you go. Your name?" Except for she didn't say your name. She said my name. I'm like, "Whoa, it's the stalkers finally." And I guess that person wanted to pursue some kind of romantic relationship or sexual act or something along those lines, but I never went back there. I don't want to have anything to do with those people. Um, so now it's been like 6 years of, let me see, 6 years of zero. They don't call the cops. Everything's gone back to normal. If I wanted to get a job, I could. As far as the crimes that were, uh, the charges that I had, um, the judge deemed me okay with those being removed from my record completely. So, like, if I went to get a job now, and they're like, "Have you ever committed a felony?" No, I've never committed a felony, but have you ever committed a crime? I could actually write down no and not be lying, according to, because they said that the menacing, harassment, and protection orders was like removed from my record. It's been sealed or something. I don't remember exactly the way it works. I had to pay like $20, talk to the CBI, talk to the Elbert County, and talk to the judge or something like that. And then they're like, "Okay, don't even worry about it." So it's like it almost never happened, because now my family's back to loving me. All I do is spend time with my mom, dad, sisters, and their children, because the final result of it was I learned about AI mass mind control. That is why um, everyone turns against you. Tons of police contacts, sleep deprivation, and then medication. Mental Institute is TI punishment. Um, Basically, it's not helping. All it does is make me shake, although not really that bad. Like if I sat here long enough, my fingers might start moving like this or something like that. But it's and that's been used in other countries as well, but it's used here in the United States for targeted individuals. The mental institution is simply a form of punishment for targeted individuals. Jail is punishment for targeted individuals. Everyone turns against you, and everyone acts aggressively towards you, and it all adds up to, even though they told me through the implant, they were like, the reason why all these people are acting this way towards you is because they're covertly controlled by a AI mass mind control. So that's it's been 6 years. I play Eve Online. Love that game. I used to play EverQuest. I play a lot of poker. I'm a winning poker player at low stakes. Passes the time. I just got back from New Mexico to watch a horse that I own run. He didn't win, but it's horse racing is a crapshoot. It's one reason why I like it. I also like shooting craps. Um, but that is targeted individuals. And I know I'm kind of like that's how it goes for targeted individuals. If you ever want to hear a targeted individual story, the last hour and 25 minutes that I just shared really sums up the way it goes for targeted individuals. If you're not having the cops called on you, and you're not going to the mental institute, and you're not getting 5 days or more of sleep deprivation, and you're not losing your job, and you're not having everybody in the world act like they hate you. Like I remember I would walk around downtown Denver because it's fun, especially when you're a targeted individual. And I went into a bar. I sat down at the bar, and they weren't serving me. I was like, "What's going on?" This is just another example. I'm kind of finishing up. That was basically my TI story. It still goes well. I mean, well, the moral of my story is spend time with your family if they don't act like total jerks towards you. If you can, forget all that stuff. Just love the people that love you. Forget ever trying to get the gang stalkers. Forget about, how terrible they are and everything else because it's AMS mind control. And when a technology is compromising your person in a manner you cannot prevent, you are not guilty of anything, regardless of if you actually did something or not. But that's what these people like to do the most is they like to attack you where you get charged with criminal acts and you did nothing. That's where they get you. That's how they are. Like, if I had punched my dad in the face and he called the cops on me, I'm like, well, I mean, I did punch him in the face, so that makes sense. But if I'm just sleeping, the cops show up, that's where these people get off. The gang stalkers, that is. So, anyways, it's AMS mind control. The whole world's covertly controlled. That's how the operation's carried out against people like myself. But today it's video gaming and family life, and not in that order. Let me rephrase that: family life and then video gaming. I put my family before anything, and before anything and everyone. So that's my TI story. Thank you for listening. Remember, if you got a little bit of crud in the eye, somebody deserves capital punishment. Nah, those people are all not guilty. I wish the gang stalkers the best. I wish the viewers the best. I wish the whole world the best. Hopefully someday the world will achieve peace on earth. If you're not already living in it, living it for yourself, peace on earth, trying to find a way to find peace and living peacefully in a state of blissful peace, in a world full of peace, or at least believing that it might happen someday, then you're missing out. So, anyways, thank you for watching. Appreciate the thumbs up. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below.